This is 6.7 lesson 1. For this lesson, we are going to simplify negative exponents. So for our first table here, we're going to replace each blank with the value of the power in simplest form. So 2 to the 4th is really just 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, which is 16. 2 to the 3rd is 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. And 2 squared is 2 times 2, which is 4. 5 to the 4th is 5 times 5 times 5 times 5, which is 625. 5 to the 3rd is 5 times 5 times 5, which is 125. And 5 squared is 5 times 5, which is 25. 10 to the 4th is 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, which is 10,000. 10 to the 3rd power is 10 times 10 times 10, which is 1,000. And 10 squared is 10 times 10, which is 100. So my question is, looking at these blanks that we filled in, what pattern do we notice as we go down the column? So if I look over here, how do I go from 16 to 8 to 4? Well, if you notice, I divide by 2 each time. 16 divided by 2 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. If I come over here to go from 625 to 125 to 25, I'm dividing by 5 every time. And in my third column, I'm dividing by 10 every time. So as we go down each column, all we're doing is dividing by the base. In our first example, 2 is our base. We divided by 2 every time. Here, 5 is our base. We divided by 5 every time. Here, 10 is our base. We divided by 10 every time. So using this pattern, we're going to continue filling out this table. Okay, so we have 2 squared is 4, and we said my pattern is to continue dividing by 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. That means 2 to the first power is just 2. Again, I'm going to continue my pattern. I'm going to divide by 2 again. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 2 to the 0 power is just 1. I'm going to continue my pattern. I'm going to divide by 2 again. 1 divided by 2 is 1/2. So 2 to the negative first power is really 1 over 2 to the first power. I'm going to divide by 2 again. 1/2 divided by 2 is 1/4, which is the same thing as 1 over 2 squared. Okay, so let's do this for our 5 to the first power. 5 to the first power is just going to be 5. I divide by 5, so 5 to the 0 power is 1. I divide by 5 again. 5 to the negative first is 1/5, which is 1 over 5 to the first in exponents. I divide by 5 again. I get 1 over 25. And in exponents, that is 1 over 5 squared. And then we can do that with 10. 10 to the first power is just 10. I divide by 10, so I get 1. 10 to the 0 power is 1. I divide by 10, so 10 to the negative first is 1 over 10, or 1 over 10 to the first. And 10 to the negative second, I divide by 10 again, is 1 over 100, which is 1 over 10 squared. So there's two things I want us to notice. The first one is, what pattern do you notice when we have 0 as an exponent? Well, every single one of these that has 0 as an exponent, I got an answer of 1. So anything to the 0 power equals 1. Please be careful here. Most people think anything to the 0 power is 0, and that is incorrect. Anything to the 0 power is 1. Then it says, explain what is happening to the base when it is raised to a negative power. So here's what I want you to notice with our negative exponents. I'm still doing 2 squared to get 4, but I want you to notice it's in the denominator. So I still do 5 squared to get 25, but again, it's in the denominator. So negative exponents don't make my answer negative. They make it switch to the denominator. So we're going to say that we put your base and positive exponent. So I want you to notice on all these, whenever I switched it down to the bottom, I made my exponent positive. So we put our base and our positive power or a positive exponent in the denominator, and then solved. So looking at this top section, when we complete each statement, 2 to the negative first is the same thing as 1 over 2 to the first. 2 to the negative second is the same thing as 1 over 2 to the second. And 2 to the negative third is the same thing as 1 over 2 to the third. Okay, so anytime we have a negative exponent, we are just really taking that exponent and putting it into the denominator. So that happens on every single one of these. So looking at letter A, I have negative 8 to the negative second. Well, we can't do negative exponents, we need to make that exponent positive. And in order to make a negative exponent positive, we have to move it. Since this is in the numerator, to make it positive, I move it to the denominator. I have nothing left in the numerator, so when I have nothing left, I put a 1. So I have 1 over, and then we have negative 8 in parentheses, that makes a difference, and my exponent is now positive since I moved it to the denominator. My 1 stays 1. I have negative 8 squared, which is negative 8 times negative 8, and that gives me a positive 64. Letter B is very similar, that I have negative 8 to the negative second, but it's not in parentheses. We do the same steps though. Since this is a negative exponent, I need to move it to make it positive. So I now have 1 over negative 8 squared. But remember, when my negative 8 is not in parentheses, my negative just gets pulled to the front. And 8 is the only thing getting squared. And 8 squared is 64. So I get negative 1 over 64 as my answer. Letter C, 20 times 2 to the negative second. Again, I do not like having a negative exponent, so I need to move it. We only move 2 to the negative second. 20 does not have a negative exponent, so we're going to leave it alone. 2 to the negative second needs to be brought down to the denominator. So on top, we still have a 20, but now on the bottom, we have 2 with a positive 2 exponent. 2 squared is 4, so I have 20 over 4, which is 5. Letter D, both of these have negative exponents. So 6 to the negative second needs to go to the bottom. 2 to the negative third is already in the denominator. So in order to make that exponent positive, I have to move it to the numerator. So now my numerator is 2 to the positive third, and my denominator is 6 to the positive second. 2 to the third is 8. 6 squared is 36. That simplifies. They're both divisible by 4. So that's going to give me 2 over 9 as my final answer. Letter E, I have 3 times 4 to the 0 power. Well, we know anything to the 0 power is 1, so this is really just 3 times 1, which just gives us 3. And then letter F. Again, we do not like negative exponents. I have 2 to the negative third on the bottom. Since that was on the bottom, we're going to move it to the top. However, the biggest mistake here is that people want to put 3 squared on the bottom. We don't want to move 3 squared because it does not have a negative exponent. We leave it alone. So 3 squared is still on the top. And now we also have 2 to the third on the top. There's nothing left in the denominator, so you could put over 1, but really we don't have to. We can leave it as is. 3 squared is 9. 2 to the third is 8. I'm sorry, it's a times, not a plus. So we have 9 times 8, which is 72.